Werner Karl Heisenberg was born the 5th of December 1901 in Wurzburg, Germany. His parents were Dr. August Heisenberg and Annie Heisenberg of the upper middle class. A school teacher said he is more developed toward the side of rationality than of fantasy and imagination.
Germany was in the last decades of the monarchy, which collapsed at the end of World War I. Heisenberg entered elementary school in Wurzburg at the age of 5. He was always ahead of his classmates in school, especially in subjects such as math and science.
Werner moved with his family to Munich, where he finished his last year of elementary school. In September 1911, he entered the Maximilians Gymnasium. A gymnasium was a 9-year school that prepared students to enter college and go on to professional careers. He graduated from the gymnasium at the top of his class.
Heisenberg studied Einstein's relativity theory entirely on his own, but he was less interested in physics as he was in mathematics. He showed an interest in classical music and played piano from the age of 12. Heisenberg, like most of his classmates, served in a school military training unit when Germany's ambitions as a world power were dashed with a defeat in 1918. Young people like Heisenberg felt betrayed by their elders. After his youth group was banned, he gained the ability to make bold attempts to solve complicated problems, including those in science.
In college, Heisenberg planned to study mathematics. He received his doctorate from the University of Munich in 1923 in the record time of 3 years. In 1927, he was appointed professor of theoretical physics in Leipzig at the age of 25. He was Germany's youngest full professor.
Heisenberg studied and trained in 3 of the world's leading centers for theoretical atomic physics, with 3 of the world's leading atomic theorists, Sommerfeld, Max Born, and Niels Bohr. In 1925, he produced the first breakthrough to quantum mechanics.
Heisenberg stated that we cannot always assign an electron a position in space at a given time, nor follow its orbit, so that we cannot assume that the planetary orbits postulated by Niels Bohr actually exist. Heisenberg tried to develop a quantum mechanics without them. Einstein, however, objected to Heisenberg's approach, in which the new theory was based on only observable quantities.
Bohr needed a new assistant in 1926, and Heisenberg seized the opportunity to learn physics with Bohr.
His intense work with Bohr and others eventually led to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and to the Copenhagen interpretation in the 1920s.
Heisenberg's travels and the teachers he encountered during the early 1920s helped him to become one of the leading physicists of his time.
Heisenberg demonstrated his talent for atomic physics and his ability to solve a problem that others were unable to solve. In most cases, however, his solution required the violation of accepted principles and procedures that were later found to be acceptable after all. After learning the basic physics principles with Sommerfeld, Heisenberg learned to follow the physics principles more and began to apply more sophisticated mathematical problems to calculate the hypothetical orbits of the electrons and atoms according to the old quantum theory. However, the properties of atoms that Heisenberg and Born predicted from the calculations did not agree with the existing experimental data. The old quantum theory had failed, but now Heisenberg and his colleagues saw exactly where it failed, and they gained hints for how it might be fixed.
What was the uncertainty principle? Heisenberg discovered a problem in the way one could measure basic physical variables appearing in the equations. His analysis showed the uncertainties, or imprecisions, always turned up if one tried to measure the position and momentum of a particle at the same time. These uncertainties, or imprecisions, in the measurements were not the fault of the experimenter, said Heisenberg. They were natural in quantum mechanics. Heisenberg presented his discovery and its consequences in a 14-page letter to Wolfgang Pauli in February 1927. The letter evolved into a published paper in which Heisenberg presented to the world for the first time what became known as the uncertainty principle.
Niels Bohr complained to Einstein that Heisenberg's approach was too narrow and his gamma-ray microscope was flawed, although the result was correct. However, when Heisenberg corrected his thought experiment, he did realize that his microscope was flawed.
The battle with Bohr grew so intense in the early months of 1927 that Heisenberg reportedly burst into tears at one point, and even managed to wound Bohr with his sharp remarks.
In the fall of 1927, Heisenberg accepted a job at the University of Leipzig. In 1929, he went on a lecture tour to the United States, Japan, and India.
Hitler came into power in January of 1933. In December of that same year, Heisenberg was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. In 1937, Heisenberg married Elizabeth Schumacher. They had 7 children and lived in Munich.
In 1941, he was appointed professor of physics at the University of Berlin and director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics.
At the end of the Second World War, Heisenberg and other German physicists were taken prisoner by American troops and sent to England. But in 1946, he returned to Germany and reorganized with his colleagues the Institute for Physics at Göttingen. This institute was, in 1948, renamed the Max Planck Institute for Physics.
From 1957 onwards, Heisenberg was also interested in work on problems of plasma physics and the thermonuclear process, and also much work in close collaboration with the International Institute of Atomic Physics at Geneva. He was also for several years chairman of the Scientific Policy Committee of this institute and subsequently remained a member of its committee. Also, he taught at numerous universities after 1957.
Werner Heisenberg died of cancer on February 1, 1976.